Rep the South Side whenever you pay with your White Sox debit card from Wintrust Community Banks and score perks like free ATMs, no monthly fees, and a $300 opening bonus. Pay with pride every time with Wintrust, Chicago's bank.
Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien. Welcome. It's the White Sox podcast brought to you by Wintrust, Chicago's bank. Show your team pride with the White Sox debit card. Get yours at wintrust.com/Sox. Member FDIC, lender. All right, on the podcast today, one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite people, the one and only Dan Plesac from MLB Network. And if you are a diehard White Sox fan, you have something in common with Dan because he is too. He grew up in Northwest Indiana, and he's going to talk about his love for the White Sox, especially now when they're going through a rebuild. He'll speak about that. Also, he watched Shane Smith, his second start against the Guardians, and he has some thoughts about Smith, what he saw, especially as a fellow pitcher. You're going to want to hear that. He'll talk a little bit about his Forrest Gump baseball career, 18 years in the majors. He never went on the injured list. How was he able to do that? We'll talk about that. His dream to one day play for the White Sox. Of course, it didn't happen. And he's going to be subbing for Steve Stone in the booth for 21 games this season on CHSN. He'll talk about that and more. It's Dan Plesac. He's back on the podcast. Here we go. All right, joining me on the podcast, one of my favorite people on the planet. It is Dan Plesac. Hey, before we begin, Dan, just give me some Hawk Harrelson. Give me your best Hawk.
Oh, who wants the bunt? He looks up. You can't put it on the board. Yes.
Marcy, stretch. Get on back there.
Get on back there. Dadgummit, Wegner. What in the hell are you doing, Wegner? He threw him out.
The mutual appreciation we both have for one Hawk Harrelson is off the charts.
Yes, that is a fact.
Hey, I have a lot I want to talk to you about. Hawk will probably come up a few times. But, you know, for people who don't know this about you, you grew up in Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, grew up a White Sox fan, Chuck. Yeah, it's the funny thing is, I've got a little explanation. I was as anti-Cub as there was. And first game I went to, Sox, Oakland A's at the old Comiskey Ballpark. That's when the A's had the handlebar mustaches. I can remember Gene Tennis, Joe Rudy, Raleigh Fingers, and seeing that. And yeah, I was a White Sox man. I was Britt Burns, Rich Dotson, that whole thing. Those were my guys, man. And it's just funny because as life turns out, my first day in the big leagues in 1986, I was with the Brewers, and our opening day was in Old Comiskey Park in 1986. Mike Ditka threw out the first pitch because the Bears had just beaten the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and it was like the coolest thing ever, Chuck, for me. And you get stuck in this Chicago thing so many times, and I tell people, when I originally came to Comcast Sportsnet and I was doing the pre and post game, it was initially supposed to be for the White Sox pre and post game, which I was really fired up about. And there was some issues. Brian McRae was supposed to do the Cubs pre and post game. He ended up backing out. Joe Riley called me, was running Comcast Sportsnet, said, hey, we've got a little switch. Instead of doing White Sox pre and post, do you want to do Cubs pre and post? And that's how that whole thing happened. But I got a great story. So I signed as a free agent. I was with Milwaukee for 7 years, became a free agent, and I signed with the Cubs. So I thought for a great idea for Christmas, I would buy a bunch of Cubs hats and have all of my family, we would take a family photo with the hats on. My dad, my uncles, my cousins, and my brothers refused to put the hat on. They would hold it, but they wouldn't wear it. That's how that White Sox Cub things runs deep. So yeah, I grew up a White Sox fan. That was my team as a kid. And if you would ask me today who I root for, I know it's a smaller minority now. Things have been a little lean for the White Sox, but I still have a soft side for the White. If I have one regret, I can't say regret. I was fortunate to play for 18 seasons, some great times, great cities. But I would have liked to worn a White Sox uniform for 1 year to see what it was like. I mean, the corner 35th and Shields, driving by the Dan Ryan Expressway as a kid. I remember looking at that ballpark thinking, I don't remember saying this, but my mom said one time we were driving into the city on the Dan Ryan heading into the city. And I said to my mom, I'm going to play there someday. I don't remember saying that, Chuck, but that's what my mom says, so I'll stick to it.
Well, you did say you were going to play there, and you did. You just played for another team, unfortunately.
Yes.
But you know what? Your memories are similar to mine in a way that, like, when I would drive up the Dan Ryan, I mean, I wouldn't drive. I was being driven when I was a kid, and I'd look out the window, and I would just wait and wait and wait until I could see the light towers at 𝗻𝗄𝗄𝗃 Park.
Absolutely.
And New Year close.
Yeah, and my hope during the baseball season, if you were driving there, that someone would hit a home run, and as you were driving, you would see the exploding scoreboard. Like, you wanted to see the fireworks. It never happened, but I always wish, like, hey, the White Sox are playing today, and if we were driving into the city, I'd be like, how cool would this be to be driving by and somebody hit a home run, I could see the scoreboard go off.
That little kid, everyone had that little kid in them, even if they were not a little kid. But I had that same feeling, those same thoughts. So how do you keep your fandom alive nowadays that we're in a second rebuild?
Well, I'll tell you what, Chuck, it's never easy when you go back, and it seems like yesterday the White Sox won the World Series. Those great teams with Mark Buehrle, 𝗬𝗎 Jermaine Dye, Paul Konerko. And I look at a couple organizations and say that it's not impossible. Now, it may take a while. It may take 3-4 years to get where you start saying, okay, hey, we've got a legitimate shot. But you look at what the Houston Astros did when realignment started. Not only were they in a bad spot, talent-wise, but they got stuck in that AL West, which that Albert Pujols had just signed with the Angels, and that West looked really tough. So not only a bad team, and you look right across the town at the Chicago Cubs, as bleak as things were, and they were bad for a while there. I think Cub fans forget how bad it was for about a 4 or 5 year stretch. But if you get the right players, and it can happen. Now, you have to have some luck involved, too, because you make some trades. You make the trade, and with the Red Sox, you give up like a lefty that, you had the hottest commodity in a trade market last year. And you get some good players back in return. And I know the White Sox are very high on the catcher they got back in return. They think someday he's going to be a difference maker for the White Sox. You just never know. But I will say this, to try to be current, I watched yesterday's game, and I was so impressed with Smith yesterday, a Rule 5 guy from the Milwaukee Brewers. It starts and it stops with the starting pitching. If you can find another Mark Buehrle, if you can find another Jack McDowell, they're out there. And sometimes they're not in your organization, but you can acquire those kind of guys, or you get lucky. Maybe Smith will be one of those guys that will be, when this rotation's good again, maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't be the first Rule 5 guy that was a hit. You look at the Toronto Blue Jays in the late 80s, they had a bonanza with Rule 5 guys. I mean, Kelly Gruber was a Rule 5 guy from the Cleveland Guard at the Indians at that time. So it's possible. When you look at it short term, yeah, it's hard to watch, because it's hard not to think of 𝗬𝗎 Jermaine Dye, Paul Konerko, Ozzie Guillen. And that seems like it was yesterday, and it was a while ago. It takes time, but it's not impossible, and it can be done. And if you get the right young players, it can turn, and it can turn in a hurry. Then, when you get that good nucleus of players like the Cubs did, you get lucky and you hit a home run with Anthony Rizzo. You hit a home run with some of the young guys, and then you're not afraid to go out in that free agent market and do what the Cubs did. You go buy John Lester. You can bring in John Lackey. You make a trade. You get Garrietta. All of a sudden, you take Chris Bryant, you take Anthony Rizzo, you take Javi Baez, and you take these young core of position players, and then you can feed that with some experienced free agent guys that can kind of finish the thing off. And then hopefully at that time, you've built up your minor league system, and you have good position players that you feel like you can count on for 5 or 6 years, and then it starts turning again. And when it starts turning again, there's positive momentum, and it's from the bottom all the way up. It's from the fans, it's from the media, it's from the organization, it's scouting development. They feel like they're doing things the right way. and all of a sudden you're starting to hit on more players, and you're not so worried about, hey, we've got to make sure that we hit a home run with this first round pick this year, because we have a few guys down there. Like you always go into a draft wanting, to draft and develop a difference maker. But when your big league product is good and you have reinforcements down in AA and AAA, particularly AA, because I think more of the prospects now are in AA than are in AAA. But if you have enough young guys in that system that you feel can be impact, it can change in a hurry, Chuck. And look what the Atlanta Braves, they went through some lean years. They acquired a lot of players. They kind of tore the thing down. They built it back up. It's not fun to go through as a fan to watch it, but it's doable. And if you have the right people in place, you get the right trades, the right draft picks, it can change fast.
Yeah, I mean, the White Sox obviously did this iteration of a rebuild of several years ago, and it only lasted, I mean, the contention window lasted like a year and a half. So there's some PTSD from White Sox fans as we go through it again. However, I will say this, that, I can be biased, my own biases. Like I see what I've been told and, about certain players and my own eye test. Hey, there's this guy and that guy. So I have my feelings about who's in the minor leagues. But literally today, I'm on X, I'm on Twitter, and MLB Pipeline puts out like the top 10 loaded minor league teams right now. And 2 of the 10 were the Birmingham Barons and the Charlotte Knights, the AA and AAA squads for the White Sox. So it's not just me who thinks this. There are people who see what's maybe coming for the Sox. Not everyone's going to hit, but that gives me hope and faith that, yeah, there's struggles currently with the major league team, but hopefully Chris Getz and company are doing a better job of like not only finding guys, developing guys, and bringing in the right guys who then become the Braves, the Cubs, because what happened with the White Sox this last time, that did not work.
Yeah, and what's tough, Chuck, and I think the White Sox found themselves in this a couple of different times in the last 15, 20 years. You're in that middle spot, right? You have enough talent on the big league roster, and you feel like, okay, you go back 3-4 years ago, and it seemed like so excited about this White Sox team, right? You had Luis Roberts. You had so many exciting young players that you felt like this team was ready to win, but you didn't have the entire package. And sometimes when you're caught in that middle, and it's really tough when you're in a 2-team town, like the Dodgers, it's like the Dodgers, the Angels, the Mets, the Yankees, the White Sox, and the Cubs. And so you're under this pressure to try to put a product on the field that can be competitive when you're in a 2-team market. And so when you're in that middle spot, you take a chance, you sign a free agent or two, and you have to pay, dearly in the free agent market. But you want to stay competitive. And it's really hard, especially when you've had an organization like the White Sox that had won a World Series and had enough facial recognition of some of the players that you say, hey, if Moncada hits, if Luis Roberts stays healthy, we've got a chance to really do something good here, right? And it didn't happen. And so it's hard to do an honest evaluation of your organization and say, okay, what we've been doing hasn't worked. We've kind of put a Band-Aid over some issues that we have. And so the next thing you have to do is say, okay, rip the Band-Aid off. We have to start from the bottom up. We've got to build our minor league system. And it's frustrating as a fan because after a while, you can sell it for a year or two and you can give fans hope and say, hey, we're really good in AA and AAA. And fans will buy that for a window. But then when the losing happens year after year after year, the man and the woman, the guy and the gal that are going to the ballpark on 35th and Shields, they don't really care as much about AA and AAA because they want to see a winning product on the field. It's hard to tear the Band-Aid off. It was something that had to be done because if you just keep kind of patching it together, you end up spending a lot of money on a team that you're thinking, hey, if everything goes right, we can make it into the postseason. And there's always injuries. It happens with every team. And listen, not to put the blame on a couple of deals. You always make a deal that you feel is the right deal to make. And I think everybody in baseball across the board thought the Moncada deal was going to be a home run. He was the talk of baseball. And Luis Robert, that they were they were the talk of the game. Like, boy, the White Sox acquired 2 super young, talented players.
And signed
But
Yasmani Grandal, right?
right.
Acquired Lance Lynn. Like, no one hated any of these deals when they happened.
Correct. And then you just, if you had a crystal ball, if you're Chris Getz and you had a crystal ball and you could look right now and say, hey, somebody would give you a heads up like, hey, this may not work next year, or this player in AA. You never know when a player goes from AA to AAA. Usually they handle that move fairly well, but it's that move from the minor leagues to the big leagues. Not everybody's Mark Buehrle. Not everybody's Paul Konerko. Not everybody just takes that next jump and they don't miss a beat. And if anything, they get better. And it goes to show you, I think you take it for granted when you're working around or you're a fan of a good team, of how special it is that you have good players year after year after year that you can count on, because it's really hard to come by. One, they have to stay healthy. Two, they have to be productive. And three, as a general manager and an ownership group, you've got to support and supplement those players and keep bringing new faces in if you don't have them in the minor leagues. And I think that's where the White Sox, I don't want to say they got stuck, but it's a hard sell when you have a team on the north side that was performing really well in 2014, 15, and 16. And all of a sudden, all this momentum is going towards the Cubs, and you're trying to fill that gap and stay competitive. But listen, it's painful to do what the White Sox had to go through in 2024. I got off to a good start the first series of the year at home. I thought the starting pitching has been good. The hitting has gone south. But listen, I don't put as much stock into that now. There are a lot of games playing in brutally cold temperatures. Watch that game yesterday in Cleveland. I mean, you're talking temperatures in the 30s. Neither team hit very well yesterday. And it's hard to get a gauge on what your team is, Chuck, until you play about 40 games. And at 40 games, your starters have taken 4 or 5 turns. Your everyday position players have around 150 at-bats. And now you'll get a pretty good gauge where you're at.
All right, you mentioned Shane Smith. I want to go a little deeper on him. We're going inside the White Sox, brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. And I want to talk about Shane Smith with you, because for the White Sox to be successful, they're going to have some winning lottery tickets. Any team needs some winning lottery tickets. Shane Smith might be that. Rule 5 pick, never. 6 innings above AA in his career. That was it. So basically never pitched above AA except for 6 innings. And he was great against the Twins. And what does he do against the Guardians? He was perfect through 4, no hitter through 5. He was making Stephen Kwan and Jose Ramirez look foolish with his changeup and his fastball as well. Ugly swings and misses. Could he be for real?
Yes. I don't know much about baseball. I'm not an expert on base running. I'm not an expert on hitting, but I will say this. Watching yesterday, what I liked the most yesterday out of Smith was very few non-competitive pitches. Chuck, when I watch a game from a pitcher, I don't care if a guy throws 97 to 100 and he bounces it in front of home plate and he air mails it neck high. Very few non-competitive pitches yesterday. What I mean is he was around the glove. Very similar. I thought 2 starts that I've watched pitchers this year that aren't household names. 𝗭𝐶ie 𝗵𝗍 was terrific the other day against the Yankees. And yesterday, I thought Smith was brilliant. If he can continue to do that, the biggest obstacle I see now, this is strictly my opinion, with young pitchers, they're chasing 2 things. They're chasing velocity and they're chasing spin rate. And they're forgetting the most important thing about pitching. That's touch and feel. That's adding, subtracting. That's pitching inside, pitching outside. What impressed me about Smith yesterday, not afraid to throw the fastball. He could locate it up, down, in, and out, and he maintained that all the way through the 6th inning. I thought the changeup is his bread and butter pitch, and it's a good one. It's so good that when a righty throws it to a righty and you get ugly swings, that's good. And it's probably going to do him a favor when they start spinning lineups around and stacking more lefties. Now you're playing into his hands, particularly if you have 3 or 4 lefties in a row, because then he finds that slot with that changeup and he can eat you alive with it. But I think the thing that surprised me yesterday, he threw a handful of backdoor sliders or cutters. I'm not sure what he calls them. And he located them perfectly to lefties. That pitch that just off the outside corner and came back in, got a few called strikes on it. I was uber impressed with him yesterday. Listen, I'm past the age of watching a guy now go, oh my gosh, look at that 97. most guys throw. I don't know if the guns are fixed or loaded or juiced or whatever you want to call it. The velocity doesn't mean a thing to me when I'm watching a guy pitch. It's that. And if you go back and you watch Mark Burley, you watch Jack McDowell, you go watch Brett Burns, you watch all the really good pitchers that the White Sox have. You know what? The guys that come out there, they're blowing 98 to 100 and they're spraying it all over the place. You know what they do? They drive you nuts because one day they have command. The next day, do you go get him in the third inning after they've walked two guys?
They need Tommy John surgery.
Bingo. What I saw out of Smith yesterday was a pitcher, not a thrower, and those guys can last. If you could throw off-speed pitches, changeups, curveballs, 2-0, 2-1, 3-2, become unpredictable, you could survive and you could thrive in this league right now because hitters are up there. You hear the same thing from most guys. Yeah, hey, you went over 3. Yeah, but I got 4 ace swings off. I don't care about an ace swing. Guys are hitting 220 to 230 all over the league. And if you could take advantage of that, how do you do that as a pitcher? You move the ball up, down, in and out. You change speeds. And in my opinion, what Smith has in this day and age right now, the dreaded equalizer, the changeup, right? It's hard to command a curveball. It's hard to command a slider and throw it for strikes, 2-0, 2-1. But, man, that changeup, it makes 94, 95 look 98 to 100. I thought it was great yesterday. I hope he can build from that. I hope that he continues to believe in his stuff because what I saw yesterday is a guy that has some staying power. I really believe. I was so impressed with him yesterday. I watched every pitch because that game was on our air at MLB Network, and so we were on following that game. And I really hadn't heard much about him. I knew that he was a Rule 5 pick from Milwaukee. I started diving in, looking at some video when he was with the Brewers. I was like, wow, But hey, listen, those kind of guys are out there, and you have to have. The beautiful thing for Smith right now is he's in an organization, Chuck. They're going to give him the ball every 5 days. He's going to get a chance to pitch, and he's going to learn, and he's going to go through some ups and some downs. And you hope that when he goes through a couple of starts where, hey, it doesn't go too well, that he still believes in himself, believes in his stuff, and that if he can continue to do what he did yesterday, don't be afraid to throw the ball in the strike zone. Pitchers are scared of one thing, Chuck, hitting bats. You talk to any pitcher. If you pitch in the big leagues, more than likely in high school, junior high, junior college, you struck people out. You don't see guys getting signed that throw 85 miles an hour anymore. So there was a time that he was the hardest thrower on the team or in the league that he played in. But you don't have to pitch and you don't have to win. You don't have to throw 98 miles an hour to win in the big leagues. You just don't have to. Look at Zach Wheeler. He's 95, 96, moves the ball up, down, in and out. Be a pitcher, not a thrower.
So I'm looking at your career. 18 years in the big leagues, over 1,000 games, 6 different teams. How many times, Dan Plesac, did you go on the injured list?
Not once.
Not once. You never had surgery either.
No, I never spent a day on the IL, not one day. And part of it was probably stubbornness. I mean, I'm not going to be here, honestly, tell you that there weren't times that my elbow was barking or my shoulder was bothering me a little bit. I went through a really tough period, 1991, 92 in Milwaukee. I was having some issues with my shoulder, but I'm going to tell you what happened my rookie season. Milwaukee Brewers in 1986, we were in the AL East. And so we were what was called at that time the swing team. So our schedule in the month of September, we played all the AL West teams. And we were leaving Toronto, had a day off on Monday, and Tuesday we were playing in Oakland. And after the Sunday game, I walked into the training room, and we were getting ready to fly from Toronto to Oakland. And Robin Yount was laying on the training room getting a shot in his toe because he had turf toe. I walked into the training room, saw that needle, and I was like, got really wheezy, had to turn back around. I was like, man, I can't imagine how bad that must have hurt to get that cortisone shot. Fast forward to Tuesday, we're taking batting practice. I'm standing in the outfield. And as a young guy in those days, you kept your mouth quiet, you kept your ears open. And if the older guys, and that was a tough group to break in with, Rollie Fingers, Pete Vukovich, Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, Ben Ogilvy, Cecil Cooper. I'm standing next to Robin Yount, and I really didn't know what to say. I was my first year in the big leagues. Do I strike up a conversation? And for whatever reason, Chuck, I said, his nickname was the Kid. And I said, Kid, I got to ask you, did that shot hurt? He goes, what do you think? And I was like, okay. And I said, man, I'm surprised you're in the lineup today. Chuck, he stone-faced cold me. He looked at me and he said, hey, did you ever fake like you were sick when you were a kid and your mom and dad went to work and you stayed home from school? And when they left, you watched TV all day and had fun. I go, oh, yeah, we all did that. He goes, that's how it is in baseball. When you find out how easy it is to take a day off, you'll do it again and again and again. And that stuck with me, Chuck. And over the years, you know, as a young player, you equate your warm-up, whether you're a starter or reliever, of how your performance is going to be when you go out there. And over the course of time, you realize that those warm-up pitches between innings or in the bullpen, they don't mean anything. There are a lot of great hitters at 5 o'clock, but a lot of them, when the lights turn on at 7, the guys that hit the ball in the second deck can't make contact. Mm-hmm. And I learned over the course of time, there were several times in that 18 years, from like year 10 to 18, where I warmed up, and I'm telling you, I felt like I had nothing. And I went out there and pitched a 3-up, 3-down inning and walked away and thought, like, wow. So I took the mentality, if I'm breathing and I could get out there, that I'm going to go out there and figure a way how to get through an inning. And that's basically how I did it.
Wow. That's good stuff. Couple more things. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
I've got like 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. I know you have a meeting. When I bring up the name Tony Gwynn and how you did against him,
wore me out. What, Chuck?
I looked it up. It up. He was 8 for 11 with 3 doubles, a homer, 5 RBIs. He batted .727 against you.
Wore me out. He actually hit a home run off me when I was in the Diamondbacks that went in the swimming pool. Not that I remember it, Chuck. I couldn't get him out. Like, I could get him to 2 strikes. He could hit a ground ball between third and short. I remember a couple times I got him out, and I was so disappointed because it was in a game that, hey, I hadn't pitched in 3 or 4 days. You want to get an innings work? And he'd swing at the first pitch and hit a ground ball to second base. I didn't want to get him out then. I wanted to get him out when it was first and third to 1-run game. That's when I couldn't get him out.
But meanwhile, I'm going to rattle these off. Mo Vaughn, 1 for 15, 10 Ks against you. Paul O'Neill was 2 for 18, 8 Ks. Jim Thome, 1 for 11, 7 Ks. Cal Ripken, 2 for 18. Pete 𝗵𝗶𝗹. What did you have against Pete 𝗵𝗶𝗹? He was 1 for 21 against you.
No, a lot of it was Pete 𝗵𝗵𝗹 induced. He always gave the home plate umpires a hard time when he on called strikes, and so kind of the word was out on 𝗵𝗵𝗹. Just get it close with 2 strikes. So if you got it within 4 inches, he was struck out.
And then I got to bring this up. You are going to be calling some games in the
21
booth
games.
This year. How many?
21 games.
21 games on CHSN. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. The White Sox reached out to me in January. I was surprised that MLB Network, was gracious enough to allow me to do 21 games. Love doing games. I did a handful, maybe 6 or 8 games with Bob Costas last year, showcase games for MLB Network. I love being at the ballpark. And when the White Sox reached out to me, made the call to MLB, talked it over, and decided, okay, if it didn't interfere with my schedule with MLB Network. So I'll be doing 21 road games. I know I've got a Dodgers series. I've got a Colorado Rockies series, a Mets series, an Orioles series. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Sit back, relax, and strap
it on. Sox baseball coming up next. You can cancel the post-game show.
Yeah, you got to say that. You got to be Hawk when you're in the booth and just give all sorts of dadgummits.
I am so looking for this. You know, the funny part about it is my mom and my brothers, when they found out I was doing it, you would have think it's the first time I arrived in the big leagues. They're like so fired up, and I am too. Like I said, I never had a chance to play for the White Sox. If I could do one thing over and do it again, I would have loved 1 year, just one season, to play on the corner of 35th and Shields. That would have been put the icing on top of the cake.
Yeah, 90 or 91, 92, 93. Those have been great years for you. That was right in the middle of your prime.
Yes.
Well, hey, Plesac, it is great to see you. Always great to see you. Looking forward to you calling the games. And let's hope the White Sox will turn things around by the time you're calling games. And, I'm hoping for a bright future. But right now, we're kind of in it. We're kind of in, what right now.
Yeah. You know what, Chuck? I guess right now, if I'm a White Sox fan, patience and trust that Chris Getz and company know what they're doing. Their minor league system right now, it looks good. And the only way you're going to get better is some of these young players can come help out the big league level. They're going in the right direction. Sometimes it takes a little longer than fans like it to.
Okay. And I wrap up every White Sox podcast tossing to our friend and idol, Hawk Harrelson. Hawk, take it away.
All right, Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.